his mistress there. Remember, he said he was hiking on the Appalachian Trail, and he said that he'd been seeking counseling at C Street. The third affair was that of former Congressman Chip Pickering, major telecom activist, or lobbyist now, an activist. He's a lobbyist, who actually conducted his affair in the C Street house, this place registered as a church, according to divorce papers filed by his wife, meeting with his mistress, who was a telecom heiress, for whom he left Congress to become a lobbyist. So all these affairs started bubbling up, and for a while it was just sort of titillating, but I think the ideological shift occurred when Governor Sanford, explaining why he was not going to resign, as he had called upon Clinton to do in similar circumstances, was it because he was like King David in the Bible. King David, who does some terrible things at times, seduces another woman, arranges to have her husband killed, yet remains in power because he's chosen by God for leadership. Well, that's a core teaching of the family, and I returned to the story and decided, look, I'm going to update this book and write a book about what the last book was sort of about, the family and history. C Street is about what they're doing right now, starting with those scandals, but then following the money and the ideas out into the world, out into Uganda, out into the Middle East, out throughout Africa, and out into American domestic affairs as well, where we see that idea of that some politicians are chosen. We can see that in an affair, a sex scandal, it's kind of goofy, but when we're talking about, say, a David Bahati, it becomes really very frightening.
And finally, the title of your book, C Street, The Fundamentalist Threat to American Democracy. This is not fringe. You don't see this as fringe in the United States when you're talking about the fundamentalist threat to American democracy. Jeff Sharlet.
No, you know, in one of the sort of the final chapters of the book, I follow back from Uganda. And by the way, I should say that most of the Americans, and this is good news, most of the American politicians have sort of said, well, things have gone too far in Uganda. We don't support that. The family, the Americans officially don't support it. The question is one of accountability. There doesn't seem to be any accountability for David Bahati. He's told me that he's never received any real opposition. But so I followed that problem there in Uganda. So, okay, this is what's going on in Uganda. This is the sort of the nightmare scenario. I followed it back to the United States and in the U.S. Armed Forces, where groups linked to the family, not the same as the family, but that's where you see the real flowering of a kind of a militarized, politicized fundamentalism that leads into situations where you have something like the 15,000 strong Officers Christian Fellowship. This is not fringe. These are officers defining their mission as reclaiming territory for Christ in the military, not allowing the opposition, this is how they put it, not allowing the opposition, all of which is spearheaded by Satan, to stand in their way. They describe military personnel who don't share their religious beliefs as spiritual terrorists. They describe the war in Iraq and Afghanistan as a spiritual war of the greatest magnitude. And you even have situations where you have senior officers. I spoke to one 3-star general who used language to describe the situation we can't even, we can't say on TV, said this is an effing clown show, where you have senior officers promoted on the basis of religion, not merit. You have strategy. You have military decisions being based on the book of Revelation in some cases. You have troops who are being forced to pray to traditions not their own, and you have the military in every way sort of fulfilling the kind of Al-Qaeda charge against the United States. There's folks in the vast majority of military personnel are honorable folks, but there's a very strong core within it that sees their mission not as defending democracy, but as expanding Christ's kingdom. And you take that story that starts in this little townhouse on C Street that expands out into the world through the efforts of men like Senator Inhofe and Senator Coburn, reaches its worst scenario in Uganda, but then you see it kind of simmering and on boil in the United States, and you realize that fundamentalism, a political fundamentalism, we've got to distinguish that from just people who have private beliefs, an issue that people felt was not part of American life is still very much present and still presenting a real challenge to the pluralist idea, the open public square of democracy idea, where everybody gets to come in and share their ideas.
Jeff Sharlet, I want to thank you very much for being with us. Author of the bestseller, The Family, contributing editor for Harper's Magazine and Rolling Stone. His new book is C Street, The Fundamentalist Threat to American Democracy. Speaking to us from Dartmouth College, where he teaches English.